Well, I'm stoked. The rubber's gonna meet the road, and we're just gonna go. So turn with me to Matthew. Matthew, as I talk about hope during the holidays, because as you may know, depression increases during the holidays. For many, the holidays is a time of joy. We're gonna go to Matthew 2, verse 9 is where we're gonna start. For many, it's a time of listening to Harry Connick Jr. Christmas music. For a lot of people, it's sipping eggnog. For others, it's looking at the Christmas lights. About a week and a half ago, I was in New York, and just seeing the beautiful, Christmas scene of New York is absolutely astounding. For a lot of people, it's a time of joy and family and seeing your friends visiting from college. But for others, it's a reminder of loved ones who are no longer there. For some, it can exacerbate their loneliness because they're conscious and cognizant and keenly aware with the scorpion stings of awareness that they're alone. For a lot of people, it brings up memories that ultimately prove to be bitter in your heart. And for a lot of people, the holidays are actually a very difficult time. And I just want to share from my heart, for me, the holidays are actually, Christmas time for me, I love the idea, I love the aesthetic. I grew up loving Christmas music and candy canes and all of that, but in my adulthood, I have really bad memories associated with Christmas, so I'm one of those people who acknowledges how beatific and incredible and unique and anomalous and beautiful Christmas is, but I also don't particularly like the holidays because for me, it just brings up memories of heartbreak. I've gone through some hard stuff during the holidays of just feeling like devastated and heartbroken. But also because this holiday season is very difficult for my family. We just learned a week and a half ago that my brother was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. And just all the stuff that my family's been through, I feel like my last name's Courson, and there's like this thing that I wonder if we have the Courson curse on our family, because kind of like the Kennedy curse, because my dad's wife died in a car accident. When I was a kid, my sister died in a car accident. Now my brother has stage 3 colon cancer. And a couple years ago, I went through an absolutely blindsiding, devastating heartbreak that I never saw coming. I went through 10 years of chronic depression. Like you, I've been through some stuff. And the holidays, while they should be a time of great joy, can really be a time of tremendous grief. But that's why I'm the hope dealer. That's why I'm here. For me, hope is not a fluffy message you move on from the more mature you get. Hope is a message you move deeper into the more wise you become. The children are the wisest, so they are our goal. We want to become more childlike and less jaded. Anybody can get jaded. Wisdom is not walking around, I think we talked about this last time, bent over double like Gandalf the Grey, saying, let me stroke my gray beard and offer sagacious maxims and aphorism of wisdom. Ultimately, wisdom is saying, can I skate more? Can I forgive more quickly? Can I love life again? Can I be filled with joy that no man can take from me? Can I discover that fun is fundamental and that Jesus puts the fun back in funeral? Because he causes the dead to raise, the lame to leap, the blind to see, the mute to speak, the deaf to hear. And ultimately, for me, hope is a message that is the goal. In fact, Paul the Apostle was so brilliant that Gamaliel, his teacher, who was like one of the great Jewish teachers of history, actually said, Paul the Apostle, or Paul, he wasn't called the Apostle at the time, he was actually named Saul, but he couldn't give Saul enough books because he just kept reading books. And that's quite an achievement because the book of Ecclesiastes ends with this idea that all the books in the world, there is no ending to the writing of books, and much studying is weariness to the flesh. What he was saying is, Solomon, in writing Ecclesiastes, is that you put the dying back in studying. There's a dying and studying. Much studying is weariness to the flesh, and the book ends in some of the final verses with this idea that there is no end to the making of books. Then John comes onto the scene, and he uses a very similar ending to his book. In the final 2 or 3 verses, John ends his book almost the same exact way as Ecclesiastes. What did John say? All the books in the world not contain the mighty deeds that Jesus did, because he's a sayer of words and a doer of deeds. All the books in the world could not contain what this man accomplished. Now, what's the difference? Ecclesiastes ended with effectively and essentially a bummer, like, oh, studying is much wearying as the flesh, and there's never an end to the reading of books. It's so overwhelming. John ends with a, yes, Jesus is so amazing that all the books in the world could not contain him. So one is like a yay, but the Ecclesiastes is like a bummer. Why? Because Ecclesiastes is about philosophy, and the book of John is about good news. What I'm here to do is not to offer you views, but good news. There's a big difference. Because ultimately, I love studying metaphysics and philosophy. Even today I was reading Nietzsche's nihilism, and I love studying Hume's empiricism and Emerson's transcendentalism and Chesterton's Catholicism. I love reading metaphysics, Sartre's existentialism. But ultimately, if you read the philosophers and the metaphysicians, usually it leads to a place of grim, jaded despair in most cases. Not all, but most. And yet when you hear the good news of Jesus, it brings you joy and hope that is not a simplistic winking at suffering, acting like bad things never happen. It's not like unicorns shooting rainbows out of their eyes. The hope I'm talking about is not just, hey, life is robustly flavored donuts of fun. If you think happy thoughts, you'll get a serotonin overflow. The hope that I'm talking about is not, well, if you just picture life as being good, it'll rain jelly beans and Skittles even if you're going through tragedy. That's not the hope I'm talking about. The hope that I'm speaking to you about tonight is that when we go through tragedies, trials, traumas, and tribulations, when we are treading upon the tempest, we can be absolutely confident that he who began a good work in us will be faithful to complete it until the perfect day. That's Philippians 1:6. Now watch this. The word complete, this is amazing. The word complete is the word telestai in Greek. Would everyone say telestai? That's the same thing Jesus said on the cross. Te telestai, it is finished. So the same thing Jesus said on the cross, te telestai, it is finished, that is the same thing that Paul said in Philippians 1:6. He said, the God who began a good work in you will be faithful to telestai, to finish it. What he's saying is, as surely as Jesus carried his cross to the it is finished last words, so too the Father will carry forth your purpose to completion. Telestai, same word, Philippians 1:6, as Jesus used on the cross. What does that mean? It means that he's deadly serious about this hope. This hope can go through a cross. Yes, you might go through crucifixion, Black Friday, but Easter egg dying, bunny hopping, Jesus Christ resurrecting, Easter Sunday is on the way. That's the wrong holiday, but it's still an eternal message. Do you know what drives me nuts? When people go to church and they talk about the cross and they end there. If you read the book of Acts, the message of the early apostles was always including the resurrection. They didn't go around just talking about the cross and then pausing the movie at the worst part. They let the story and plot run to the end, which was the resurrection. Yes, Paul said, I have come to you preaching nothing save Jesus Christ and him crucified. But then he went on to say, if there's no resurrection, we above all men are most miserable. So if the cross is your message without the empty tomb, you're going to be very depressed. And there are a lot of despairing Christians because they walk around with this crucible around their neck, like, oh, I have to carry my cross every day. It's so brutal. Failing to realize there's an empty tomb. We're all in this together. Everything's going to be okay. Death is swallowed up in Nike. That's the Greek word for victory in 1 Corinthians 15. So we're absolutely confident that there's one on our team who's braver than Batman, stronger than Superman, more indomitable than Iron Man. His name is the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, who told us, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. There's an empty tomb. Death does not have the last word. So don't stay at the cross. You go through the cross to the resurrection. So in the book of Acts, they're always pairing and marrying these two ideas of the cross and the resurrection. Basically, our story and our message is always invariably, ineluctably, and inevitably one of hope. The Bible says Christ in you is the hope of glory. And I want to tell you, my friends, that there is hope during the holidays. Did you know that Jesus never predicted his crucifixion without also predicting his resurrection? And ultimately, I think what we do is we stop at the cross, but we often just leave out the whole empty tomb business. That's kind of a big deal in the narrative arc of Scripture. That's kind of important symbolism, because the fact of the matter is this, and this is super important. When Jesus said, carry your cross, a lot of people think that means I walk around with a scourge flagellating my back with 39 lashes, and I walk around saying, woe is me, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, why don't I just go eat worms, and I'm going to be a martyr doormat for everybody around me. I'm not really sure how that vibes with what Jesus said, I give you joy that no man can take from you. Because a lot of Christians look like they got baptized in lemon juice. And like they take their morning bath in prune juice. Okay, that's not our destiny. That's why I love hanging out with David Z, because you can't hang out with him and not get more joy. You just get happy when you hang out with this guy. David, you're a lump of sunshine. I love you. Light of the world. Now watch. This is huge. When Jesus was 11 years old, something happened historically that he would have had firsthand experience with. The Roman armory was in a town called Sepphoris. This Roman armory in the town of Sepphoris was invaded by Judas the Galilean, who was a revolutionary, subversive firebrand of a leader who led a Jewish revolt against Rome by raiding the Roman armory at Sepphoris. And here's what happened. Rome dealt swiftly and summarily with his uprising. Rome judged him by crucifying Judas the Galilean and 2,000 of his cohorts on crosses all along the roadside. So 2,000 people were lined up along the roadside, crucified, because they led a revolt against Rome. Sepphoris, where this city took the armory was, the crucifixions, this was 4 miles from Nazareth. Where was Jesus' hometown? Okay, work with me. I know you guys know this. Where was Jesus' hometown? Nazareth. So Jesus walks out the door in the morning, and what does he see? Along the roadside, 4 miles from where he lives, there's 2,000 crosses. And perhaps that was etched like psychic acid on his memory. He sees 2,000 rebels crucified on the road. And so he's like, wow, crucifixion's a really big deal. Crucifixion was capital punishment employed and deployed by the Roman Empire when you had revolted against the government. Watch this. Carrying your cross in Jesus' generation in the first century had nothing to do with living a miserable life. Carrying a cross was an anti-violence message. It was either you can take up your sword and fight the Romans, which is what, remember one of Jesus' followers was a zealot? One of his 12 disciples was a zealot. The zealots teamed up with, I actually heard that they're the same people as the Sicarii dagger bearers. Who were they? In the first century, Sicarii dagger bearers would hide out in caves. They would wear cloaks. And have you ever heard the phrase cloak and dagger? They would have a dagger in their cloak. They would go into the public marketplace and stab Romans and then disappear in the crowd. Not only would they stab Romans, they would knife, talk about the ghetto, would knife Roman sympathizers. I just went on a walk. I'm like, David, I'm going on a power walk, before I speak. And he's like, yeah, just be careful. But anyways, they would take knives and they would stab people, right? One of these Sicarii dagger bearers, or zealots, was one of Jesus' followers. David, if you could help me with this, was it Judas the Zealot, or was it Simon the Zealot? I forget which one. Was it Simon the Zealot? Simon the Zealot. Okay, perfect. My hippocampus needs a little bit of refreshing. Okay, so here we go. Watch this. Actually, when you go on quick rabbit trail, they lead you to nice places, ask Alice in Wonderland, but quick rabbit trail. If you go on a 30-minute walk, brisk 30 to 40-minute walk 3 times a week, it builds up your hippocampus, which helps you have better memory. So if you want better memory recall, go on power walks. It actually does build your hippocampus and stops the aging process in your memory home in that part of your brain. But be that as it may, this is super important. I don't remember what I was going to say. I need to go on more power walks. What was I talking about? Oh, right. Okay. So Forrest, right? There's thousands of crosses. So etched like psychic acid on Jesus' brain. He's 11 years old. He's like, what in the world? Look at all these people crucified by Rome. To him, carrying a cross was an anti-violence message. It was either take up a sword or take up a cross, but you can't do both. And what Jesus told Peter when Peter took out a sword to lop off Malchus's ear, what did Jesus say? Put away your sword. Instead, take up your cross, which Peter did at the end of his life when he was crucified upside down by Rome. It was an anti-violence message. It was, don't take up your sword, take up your cross. So carrying a cross does not mean you walk around saying, I hate life. It's so awful. Being a Christian is the most miserable experience in the world. That is not what taking up a cross is. Taking up a cross is, I could fight my enemies right now, but I'm going to die to self. And I'm going to deny myself the desire for revenge, and I'm going to say, crucify me upside down. That's what Peter did. Are you tracking with me? So I'll go through the list with you. Any verses that people take to make the Christian experience super either boring or miserable or not joyful, that's just not what Jesus intended when he called his followers to be healed of their broken hearts, giving them a peace that no one could take, giving them a peace that the world could not give, and giving them a joy that no man could take from them. The fruit of the Spirit is joy, Galatians 5:22. So we need joy and we need hope even during the holidays. This is super integral, germane, essential, and important. And here's what I want to tell you. Jesus fully could have wiped out his enemies. You are aware of this, right? Jesus wasn't soft. He was tough. In fact, I just read the other day that Jesus was very likely a construction worker. So for decades, apparently, or I should say for at least a decade, he would have been a blue-collar carpenter. Now, some historians argue that blue-collar work was esteemed in ancient literature only by the Bible. So the Bible was the first ancient document to lift up in esteem blue-collar work. Jesus himself was a blue-collar worker. So if you do blue-collar work, you're very Christ-like in that, which is really beautiful. The first job ever given to mankind was to be a gardener. That was Adam, which means mankind, that we translate Adam or man. That was mankind's first job, to tend the garden and to keep it. So Jesus, he was this blue-collar construction worker, and the interesting thing is he became a rabbi. In fact, some scholars suggest that Jesus was a Pharisee. And if Jesus was indeed a Pharisee, that's really epic because he was so anti-establishment, he tore down the system from inside it. Kind of like Neo going into the Matrix. He tore it down from within, which is super dope because he called the Pharisees whitewashed tombs. He said, you're like dirty cups, clean on the outside, but you're filthy on the inside. He said, you go across land and sea to make converts, but you make them twice as much sons of hell as yourself. Not very politically correct. That's not the kind of stuff you tweet and get away with. And yet when people quote Jesus, they say, look at how angry he was. Who was he angry at? Was it prostitutes? No. Was it tax collectors, cheaters, gangsters, or mobsters? No. He was angry at religious people. The Pharisees. He actually made fun of them. They would walk around being like, oh, look at me, I fast. And Jesus is like, wash your face. Literally. They'd be like, look at me, I give 1/10 of everything I have to the tithe. And they would blow their trumpets in the marketplace. And Jesus is like, don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing, let alone let everyone else know. Then, I love this, the Pharisees, they would walk around saying, oh, Father, I thank you that I fast, I give 1/10 of everything I have to the poor, and I pray in the marketplace for everyone to hear me. And they were praying before men. And Jesus said, pray in your prayer closet. Some suggest that the shawl that the ancient Jews would wear, that can also be translated prayer closet. It's the same syntax. So cover your face and pray in your closet. Don't let anyone see what you're doing. Why? Because if you kneel before God, God will stand up for you. And when God stands up for you before men, no man can stand against you. People might put you down. They can't take you down. You don't have to impress people because God will oppress the enemy whenever they come against you. So Jesus is He's so wise. Like, he's walking around making fun of the Pharisee who would say, oh, I thank you that I am not like this tax collector and sinner. And Jesus is like, funny, the tax collector is the one who's justified and not you. And so if he was a Pharisee, he could full on throw rocks while he was in the tent because he was criticizing his own, which is really cool. We don't know for sure whether he was a Pharisee or not, but we do know, although there's some speculation that he was a rabbi. He was a Jewish teacher. And that was the difference between Moses and Jesus. Remember how Jesus, when he was transfigured, his face glowed? And Moses, his face glowed on Mount Sinai. Jesus, when he was on Hermon, or some scholars suggest Tabor, his face glowed during the transfiguration. Moses, his face glowed. But what happened with the revelation? With the revealing, there was also a concealing. With the knowing, there was also an unknowing. A cloud covered the glory. A cloud covered the glow. Both in Jesus' transfiguration and Moses receiving the commandments on the mountain. And what was the difference between the two? Moses came down with 10 commandments, laws in his hands. Jesus came down with no law in his hands, saying, I have not come to abolish the law, nor to bring a new law, but to fulfill the law. So I come without the law. I come with grace and truth. John chapter 1. So Jesus, this is amazing. He had this profound ability to be anti-establishment, to be anarchic, to literally pit himself against the assembled might of Jewish orthodoxy. 6,000 Pharisees who walked around so sad, so somber, holier than thou, and Jesus is like, bring me the kids. Let's play with kids. It says he takes up the little kids in his arms. A lot of people don't understand ancient humor because we have different jokes. After 2,000 years, we're on a different continent. But back in Jesus' day, he was cracking jokes. Like, for example, when he said, so if you think making jokes in Bible studies is un-Christ-like, that's just because you don't know ancient humor. Like when Jesus said, for example, I love this one. He said, if you see a speck in your neighbor's eye, how can you point at the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log hanging out of your eye? Like to them, that was very funny. Like picturing a log hanging out of a guy's eye, like you have a speck, dude. Another joke he made is, it's not very funny to us today because it's just different humor and culture, but like when he said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom, like they would have laughed at that. Like a camel going through the eye of a needle, that's funny. Like to them, that was just funny humor. And actually, Jews have become some of the greatest comedians of all time because they went through Auschwitz, and the only way to survive getting sacked by Rome and Sennacherib and Assyria and the Chaldeans and the Babylonians and the Romans and the Germans is to eventually make jokes. Because you have to have joy to counteract as compensation all the trials that you go through. But be that as it may, Jesus has this joy. I'm trying to paint this image of Jesus for you. He has this hope about him that was totally newfangled, that was totally different from what they were used to. Usually the rabbis would say, Rabbi Ben Hillel or Ben Soma says, and they would quote him. The various and sundry teachers. But Jesus said, you have heard it said, but I say to you. And he would actually quote Moses and then make up his own Bible verse. He was such a boss, he would quote the Bible, then make up his own verse. Say, like, you heard Moses say, an eye for an eye, but actually, let me say, just turn the other cheek. It's like only Jesus could get away with that. He's like, turn with me to the book of Exodus. You've heard it said, okay, now let's make up a new one here. No wonder he got crucified. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. He just went against the system. And what I want to tell you is depression increases during the holidays statistically. We're going to go against the system. We live in a very jaded culture where people are very depressed. People are suicidal. A person commits suicide once every 40 seconds. We live in a jaded culture where these are basically your options. You can either be religious or you can be a nihilist. And I want to present a different option to you. That you don't have to have religion or nihilism. You can go on adventures with the God of hope, friend ventures with squad, as you have hope, which is dope. You can go through life as a child, anti-system. You're not a bubble on the tide of empire, subsumed by systemic oppression. You're going through life adventurously. As an optimisfit, that's what the book is called that I wrote, that I'm kind of talking about some of the content. As an optimistic misfit. You go through life saying, I'm going to have hope during the holidays, and I'm not going to be the despairing. I'm not going to say, well, I have to work 40 hours a week for 40 years to retire on 40% of my income, get a 401k, a dog named Spot, a white picket fence, 2.5 kids. I have to drop 150 G's on a college education that I could get for $1.50 at the local library because my degree is going to be in communications, and this is how you get the American dream, even though I don't really know what I want to do with my life, but this is what I'm told I'm supposed to do. If you want to go to college, fantastic. If you're going to be a neurosurgeon, you better go to college because I don't want you working on my brain if you didn't go to school. Having said that, I think that we're presented with this image of how you're supposed to live your life, and perhaps Jesus offers a much more adventurous way to live. My heart for you, listen, I wasn't planning to talk about any of that. I was just a long intro, like David said talk for an hour, so I'm like, okay, that's the problem. Half of my message is on the intro to my introduction. So I know I covered a lot right there. To sum it all up, and then we're going to go into our message. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to give you this stuff. Outside the box, inside the book. When you get inside the book, you have a way of breaking outside the box. We're going to live adventurously. We are going to live hopefully. We are going to live joyfully. And just because we're having a blast doing all this, while we're at it, we might as well change the world. We're on this mote of dust in a sunbeam hurtling through space at 67,000 miles per hour. While we're here, we might as well change the planet. How do we do that? How do we have hope during the holidays that is going to change a world that has become so depressed, either subsumed by the system of corporate or religion, or feeling depressed because they have no answers and nihilism? We're going to present something totally new. We're going to ignite a fierce rebellion against hopelessness as we go on friend ventures with the God of Hope, God and Squad, and we're going to change our generation. How do we have hope during the holidays? Well, let's take a look at Matthew chapter 2. Are you guys there? Turn with me to Matthew 2. And before we get into this, would you guys all say hi to the Instagram? Because you all look beautiful. My camera's broken, so I have to do it this way. Would you guys just be really excited because you are. That's who you are. Okay? So we're not baptized in prune juice here. No baptized in lemon juice. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I love you guys. You guys are bosses. You look great. We love you. Okay, that's good. People are going to love that. Okay. Oh, that's how you save it with this update. I see. Okay, here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to take the nativity scene and we're going to break it down biblically in Matthew. And we're going to talk about how it gives us hope. We're going to talk about 3 familiar nativity items, how they bring us hope. Number 1, we're going to talk about wise men. Everyone say wise men. Wise men. Number 2, we're going to talk about shepherds. Everyone say shepherds. Shepherds. Number 3, we're going to talk about the first Christmas carol in the Bible. Everyone say Christmas carols. And then the 4th is going to be a surprise in the nativity scene. We're going to talk about baby Jesus' first words. You say, what were his first words? Ooh, this is the climax. Just you wait. Just you wait. What were his first words as a baby? Well, you might be surprised. Matthew 2, verse 9 through 11. When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced. Everyone say rejoiced. Rejoice. With exceedingly great joy. Everyone say exceedingly great joy. Okay, so immediately the first message of Jesus causes people to rejoice with exceedingly great joy. You know what? That's a good way to live your life. Rejoice with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him. Gold. Everyone say gold. Gold. Frankincense and myrrh. Now, here's the thing. Right off the bat, Jesus is in trouble. He's too powerful for Herod's liking. He didn't have a problem calling out the powers that be. For example, one time he called Herod, the king, a fox. Now back then, you don't call people foxes and you don't call kings foxes. But the Pharisees came to Jesus and said, Herod's trying to kill you. And Jesus said, go tell that fox. So he wasn't afraid to trash talk people. Remember there was a guy who came to Jesus and said, I'll follow you wherever you go. And what did he say? Foxes have holes, birds have nests, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What was he saying? Foxes, the Herods. Birds, the Roman national symbol was an eagle. Herod and Caesar, they have their way of gaining a kingdom through avaricious violence. but I, the Son of Man, gain my kingdom a whole nother way. And you know what's so cool is he's not like the foxes of the Herodian Jewish kings, nor like the birds, the eagle of the Caesar emperors. He was a King of kings and Lord of lords who ruled totally differently. He didn't have a crown of gems, but a crown of thorns. Not a golden scepter with which to rule, but a wooden scepter with which the Romans beat him. Not a purple robe of majesty, but a purple robe of mockery. Not subjects kissing his feet, but he washed the feet of his subjects. The sign above his head didn't say Henry, king of the English, or Charlemagne, king of the Franks, or Alexander, king of the Macedons. It said Jesus, king of the Jews, meant to mock him. He was the most unlikely king imaginable, and yet this King of Kings ended up putting death to death, so we don't have to be scared to death of death. Because at the place of the skull, Golgotha, he crushed the skull of the serpent, fulfilling the Genesis 3:15 proto-evangelion with the crown of thorns on his skull, and said, roughly give or take, I'm amazing. I have overcome the world. Caesar and Herod, they conquer earth by bathing the world in the blood of their enemies. I, the King of Kings, conquer the world by bathing my enemies on planet Earth with my own blood. Hashtag no big deal, Loki, world domination. He's so good. So he's like, yeah, just tell that fox he's an imposter. Basically, if you called somebody a fox, you were saying they were a pretender. If you called someone a lion, you were esteeming their greatness. Jesus called Herod a fox. Why? Because Luke 8:3, I can't remember if I've told you this before, but Luke 8:3 says that one of Jesus' followers was Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward. Everyone say Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward. That's Luke 8:3. So watch this. Herod, overseeing his familial household, remember Herod was the richest man. Some say he was one of the richest men in history. He would have had the biggest familial household estate in all the land of Israel. He was like the Bill Gates of Israel. He hired on as his chief of staff, his right-hand guy, his steward, a guy named Chuza. Chuza marries a woman named Joanna. Joanna evidently gets tired of the red carpets and banquets and lavish lifestyle and opulent, extravagant, excessive way of the upward mobility of the higher class. She leaves that, follows a penniless teacher from Nazareth, starts walking with this homeless man named Jesus, and she, the Bible says in Luke 8:3, provided for Jesus out of her substance along with Susanna and Mary and a few other women also. So she's providing for Jesus financially, Luke 8:3 tells us. Joanna is. Who's Joanna? The wife of Chuza. Who's Chuza? Herod's steward. How is Chuza making his money? By working for Herod. So Herod was paying Chuza. Chuza was giving his money to Joanna. Joanna was providing financially for Jesus, which meant Herod, in trying to kill Jesus, the Pharisees said, Herod's trying to kill you. Jesus called him a fox because little did Herod know, while trying to kill Jesus, he was actually paying his bills. That was good, you have to admit. That was sick. Like, if Herod's talking behind my back, he's behind me for a reason. God doesn't take me deeper to drown me, he just knows my enemies can't swim. See the Egyptian charioteers for more details. Psalm 114 says he has put my enemies under his feet. So if you want to say something to your enemy, you better write it on your sneakers because he's under your feet. My haters are my motivators. Tigers don't lose sleep over the opinion of sheep. So he called Herod a fox. That's why when I play basketball, I trash talk and I just say, what would Jesus do? That was a joke. Okay, so we should turn the other cheek and be loving, but sometimes you got to stand up to power and call Herod a fox. Okay, powerful stuff. Herod tries to kill Jesus, but that's Herod Antipas, right? Herod Antipas was a successor to Herod the Great. You can't have success without a successor. Herod the Great split his kingdom off to 4 different successors. Herod Antipas was the wealthiest of all of them. So Herod Antipas tried to kill the adult Jesus, but who tried to kill the baby Jesus during the Christmas story? Herod the Great, right? Why? Because Jesus was called the Christos, the Mashiach. What does that mean? Christos, Christ, Greek, Mashiach, Messiah, Hebrew, means the anointed one. Now back then, if you were inaugurated into office, you didn't swear on a Bible like Obama or like Trump does. Back then, you would get anointed with oil. So remember Samuel anointed David 3 times? And that's when he became king after he was anointed thrice by Samuel. To be made king, you had to be anointed. So when you called somebody the anointed one, that's what the word Christ or Messiah means, you were saying they were a king. It had political overtones. So if Jesus were your school teacher, you wouldn't say, Mr. Christ, I have a question about this math problem. Christ was not a last name, it was a title, it was an adjective, it meant anointed one. So when you said Jesus Christ, that's just another way of saying King Jesus. It was a political phrase. That's why Jesus had to warn his disciples, don't tell anyone I'm the Christ. Do you remember when he'd do that? People always wonder, why did he say that? Because they thought, they were expecting a Christ, the Jewish nation, that would literally bring in an age of Jewish ascendance by killing the Romans. And this is true, they believed he would cook Leviathan meat and serve people Leviathan slabs of meat on the proverbial barbecue. And this Messiah would serve Leviathan to the Jewish people, making Israel or Palestine the center of the world. And the Jewish people would ascend to their rightful place as God's chosen people, and all the world would know it. And ultimately, Jesus is like, yeah, don't tell anyone I'm the Christ, because you guys have a jacked up perspective on what that actually looks like. I'm not going to take up a sword, I'm going to carry a cross. Now, again, Jesus was so powerful, he could have wiped out the Romans. He could have said, bring my Sicarii dagger bearers, bring the zealots, let's go to war. Furthermore, he could have just spoke a word according to like how the biblical stories portray him and just knocked them all out. Remember when the Jewish lynch mob came to arrest Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? They said, who is Jesus of Nazareth? And he quoted the bush that liked to do existentialist poetry in the book of Exodus. He's like, Rene Descartes, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. He's like, I am that I am. The bush, right? He quotes the bush from Exodus. When he quotes the bush from Exodus in the Garden of Gethsemane, everybody falls down backwards. So all the soldiers come to arrest him. They're like, who's Jesus of Nazareth? They come with their swords and they come with their army regalia. Who is Jesus of Nazareth? And Jesus is like, I am, quoting the bush. And the Bible says they fell down backwards. There was another time where they tried to arrest Jesus, and the officers came back to their CO. They're like, sorry, we couldn't arrest Jesus. They said, why not? The CO said, why not? The superior commanding officer said, why couldn't you arrest Jesus? And the soldier said, no man ever spoke like this man. He speaks as one with authority. The word is exousia in Greek. It's the kind of authority someone has when they walk in a room, and you don't know who they are, but you know they're powerful. In fact, you might not even see them, but you know somebody powerful just entered. That's the kind of authority wafting from Jesus in palpable waves. So they're like, we couldn't arrest him because no man ever spoke like this man. Could you imagine being a cop and you're told to arrest somebody by your CO, and you come back to the office after a day's work, after the 9 to 5, you say, I'm sorry, officer. I'm sorry, sir. I couldn't arrest the fugitive. Why not? Did he have an AK-47? No, he had a John 3:16. Grrrah. Game over. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, he was such a smooth talker, like, couldn't arrest him. So do you get why when Jesus is like, I'm going to take up my cross, but Peter said, I want to take up a sword. Remember, the cross was an anti-violence message. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Peter was still about the Christos, violent, vengeful, nationalistic, vindictive, like, Messiah that he was picturing. When Jesus was about to be arrested, what does Peter do? He takes his sword and chops off Malchus' ear. And then I love Jesus' response. He's like, put away your sword. Do you not know that I could call down 12 legions of angels? And you're like, why would calling angels help? Aren't angels like cupids that shoot heart arrows at people and they float on cloud 9 in the 7th heaven? They're like these little cherubic fat babies that like, oh, I'm here on Valentine's Day. Like, what are 12 legions of angels going to do? No, my friends. I don't know where we got these perspectives, but basically in the Bible, angels were not messing around. Like, don't picture Cupid, picture Chuck Norris with wings. These guys, they're called the heavenly host. What does the heavenly host mean? It means heavenly armies. So, like, they were a bad apple. There's one angel that wiped out 185,000 Assyrians in a single night in the age of Sennacherib in the book of Isaiah. In a single night, an angel could kill 185,000 Assyrians. Brutal in the story. Jesus said I could call down 12 legions. How many soldiers are in a legion? Well, a legion was a Roman military unit of 6,000 troops. Now watch. When Jesus passed over the Sea of Galilee, he asked a demon-possessed guy in the story, what's your name? What did the demon say? Legion. So when Jesus cast legion out of the man, what was he doing? He was casting out Israel's greatest shame. Because the legion armies were Israel's greatest shame. They reminded everyone that the Jews had lost, the Romans had won, the legions literally murdered people in the streets. There was one instance in Magdala where they killed 2,000 people. Like, the legions they didn't acknowledge Yahweh, yet they beat Israel, and the Jews would look at the legions and it was their greatest embarrassment. Like, wow, we lost, they won. And when Jesus cast the legion out of the man, if you're a Jew reading that in the first century, you're like, whoa, did he just do that? Like, was that a rap battle against Rome and he just won? Like, he cast out legion. Do you see the overtones going on there? And here's what's fascinating to me. Jesus said I could call down 12 legions of angels. Again, using Roman military terminology. Now, why is that interesting? Because a legion was a Roman military unit in the first century consisting of 6,000 troops. So if you multiply 6,000 times 12, how many angels do you get? 72,000, right? 72,000 angels. Now, if one angel could wipe out 185,000 Assyrians, and Jesus said I could call down 72,000 of those guys, if you take a census of the earth in the year 1 AD, there were 300 million people on earth. So if you crunch the numbers and do the math, Jesus was saying, I could wipe out the entire Earth's population 44.4 times over with a single prayer. Put away your sword, I got this. He was powerful. In fact, when he was crucified, what was the sign above his head? King of the Jews. And I've told you this before, but remember it was in Roman, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew? Remember that? I think we talked about that brief part, but Hebrew was the language of Jewish religion. Greek was the language of the metaphysicians. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Zeno, Epicurus. And Latin was the language of Roman politics. So when it said Jesus is the King of the Jews in Latin, Hebrew, and Greek, it was saying he's the king of politics, he's the king of religion, and he's the king of philosophy. No biggie. Not only is he the king of the Jews, he's the king of everything. And Paul actually says even under the earth, they're going to bow to him. So just this powerful figure that obviously is a threat to Herod's throne. He's like, both him and his successor, Herod the Great and Herod Antipas, are like, we got to kill this guy. Not just when he was an adult and Herod called Herod Antipas a fox, but even when he was a kid, Herod the Great, watch this, he tries to kill Jesus. Why? Because what's happening in the story before us? Back to Matthew, here's what's going on. The wise men come and offer Jesus gifts. Now, gold was a king's metal. Everyone say king's metal. So if you gave someone gold, that was a kingly gift. You were saying they're royalty. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us there were 3 wise men. So in your nativity scene, you might see 3 wise men, but actually, we don't know how many there were. There could have been tons. When Jesus was given gold by however many wise men there were, these were magicians from the East who practiced astrology, which has amazing insights and implications in it. That these men who are astrologer magicians from a different culture in the East are the first people to recognize Jesus as king. They give Jesus gold, thereby recognizing that he's royalty. So when it says they give gold, that's a big deal. Herod does not like this. What does Herod do? He kills all the babies under 2 because he's like, they just give to him. They're saying the next king is born. They're saying the heir to the throne of Israel, the king of the Jews, has just been born. We got to kill all these babies. What does Jesus do? He flees to Egypt as a baby with his parents. He then comes back to Israel, and as an adult, he grows up, gets baptized in the Jordan River, passes through the Jordan, and then wanders in a wilderness for 40 days. Matthew wrote that to show us the Jewish parallel, that Israel, when Israel was a baby nation, was taken to Egypt, then passed through the water, the Red Sea, to wander in a wilderness for 40 years. Matthew was writing those parallels. He was writing to a Jewish audience. They would have understood what he was doing there. And then what does Jesus do in the wilderness? Well, people don't ever talk about this. This is sick. He was ministered to by animals. It says the beasts ministered to Jesus with the angels. So Jesus is walking around with a bunch of animals. Why? Because Isaiah prophesied that the wolf, the lion, the lamb, and cattle would lie down together in peace. A baby would stick his hand in an adder's den and not be harmed. Man and beast would be at peace with each other. Why is that interesting? Because Jesus in the desert, after fulfilling this Jewish story, is hanging out with animals and friends with them. St. Francis, the patron saint of animals, did the same thing. It was said that he could tame birds. But Jesus is like walking around hanging out with animals. Why? Because Romans says he's the last Adam. Why is that interesting? Because the first Adam, what did he do? He hung out with animals so much so that he named them. Now, in Hebrew culture and Jewish consciousness, to name something in Hebrew culture back then was to have ownership over it. So when it says Adam named the animals, it was saying he was having dominion over the earth and conquering it. He was owning planet Earth. That's the symbolism. So when Jesus is hanging out with animals, he's the last Adam fulfilling the first human's teleologic design and destiny. And then watch. The word Eden, where the first Adam was, can be translated either delight or desert. Everyone say desert. Everyone say delight. That's what the word Eden means. Where was Jesus hanging out with the animals for 40 days? In a desert. Is the valley of Jeshimon, which means the place of devastation. So he turned the desert into a delight. He turned the wilderness into Eden, tamed the animals, and had dominion over the earth and subdued it, fulfilling the prophecy of Psalms that the earth God has given to the sons of men. I always like to say the earth is yours, so skate on it. Like he's given it to us. That's why these stories of Jesus like walking on water and healing sickness and hanging out with animals and cursing fig trees and having dominion over nature and the wind and the waves obeying him, that's what man was meant to be. That's what the first Adam was meant to be. He was meant to conquer the earth and subdue it, but we lost. We lost our control over the earth, and Psalm says the earth he's given to the sons of men, and Jesus is like, fear not, it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Have dominion over the earth, subdue it. And that's why also in the Garden of Gethsemane, where was the first place Jesus bled? Does anybody remember? Where was the first time we ever see Jesus bleeding, where did he bleed? The sweat of his brow. Romans 5:1 teaches that Jesus' blood signifies redemption. Why was the first place he bled from the sweat of the brow, if it symbolizes redemption? Because Romans says he's the last Adam. What happened to the first Adam? He was expelled from the garden, and the curse was he had to work by the sweat of his brow. So Jesus is the last Adam who goes back into the garden to bleed by the sweat of his brow to reverse the curse and redeem man's work. If you see these like parallels in the Bible, they're insane. That's why I'm a big proponent of, like I watch evangelicals always like thumping the Bible saying, we need to read this literally, but they don't read it literally. When you see the connections, this is a smart book, right? This is a smart book. It's not just thus saith the Lord, it's also a very intelligent book. And when you read it that way, it really is alive and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword, and it never returns void. So all these parallels are going on. Jesus is presenting this threat to both the religious authorities, but also Herod and Caesar. That's why Pilate gets mixed up in this. Pilate represents Rome. Herod represents the Jewish kingdom. The Pharisees represent Hebrew religion. They're all conspiring against Jesus to kill him. Why? Because from day one he's a threat. He's getting offered gold. Now here's what's interesting. Gold is a king's metal. Revelation chapter 1 tells us in this apocalyptic vision of John, when he writes this apocalyptic literature, we don't even use this style of genre of literature anymore. That's why Revelation is confusing to a lot of people, and even Peter's epistles too. But back then they had this genre of literature called apocalyptic. And he paints Jesus in his present state. Remember, this is Revelation. John's an old man now. In this story, he sees Jesus as having eyes like flame, hair like wool, feet like burnished brass, and he's wearing gold. Why? Because what was John saying? He's the king. Gold was a king's metal. But watch this. It says he's wearing a girdle of gold. Why is that interesting? Do you remember what Jesus wore when he washed his disciples' feet in John 12 and 13? What did he wear? A girdle. It specifically says he took up a girdle. Why? Because back then a girdle was a slave's garment. You see, in wealthy households in Jewish ancient culture, what you would do is you would usually have a servant girl who would wash the feet of the guests that came in. So when Jesus put on a girdle, he was acting like Judas' slave girl and loving his enemies so much that he washed Judas' feet knowing you would betray him. He's very loving. If you're picking up what I'm throwing down and catching what I'm pitching and mowing what I'm growing, he's very loving. So he acts like Judas' slave girl, washes his feet wearing a girdle. Why? Because a girdle or an apron back then, it was a sign that you were a slave. Philippians 2 says he thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but he took on the form of a slave. That's why he wore a girdle. A girdle was a slave's garment. And here's why that's interesting. Because today, if you see a guy with a uniform, you're like, oh, that's a police officer. If you see a guy with a jersey, you're like, that's a basketball player. If you see a person with an apron, you're like, that's a chef. If you see somebody with a blue collar, like, oh, mechanic, a white collar, oh, corporate CEO, whatever. We can kind of tell what people do even today by, like, I can tell on the plane today, the Alaska representative flight attendant wears the Alaska attire. Back then, when you wore a girdle, you were saying to everyone, I'm a slave. So when it says Jesus specifically changed clothes and he took up a towel or a girdle, he was saying, I'm your servant. I'm going to serve you. Now watch. Revelation says he wears a girdle, slave's attire of gold, a king's medal. So what is John saying in that imagery? Jesus is a servant king to this day. A lot of people think, oh, Jesus was like meek and mild on earth, but in Revelation he's like this violent king. What you have to remember is in John's vision, Jesus is still a servant king. And here's why the wise men give us hope. This is what I want you to see in the nativity scene. In giving Jesus gold as a baby, and then at the end, Revelation, we see him wearing this gold in a girdle. It's saying he's a servant king. And so often, we say, how can I serve you, Lord? And perhaps his reply is, you're getting it all wrong. How can I serve you? Now, a lot of people say, don't serve me, Lord. I want to serve you. Didn't Peter do the same thing? The caffeinated disciple? Jesus wears a girdle to wash his feet. What does Peter say? Not me, Lord. I will not allow you to wash my feet. Then Jesus is like, you have no part with me. Then Peter's like, well, then wash my whole body. Definitely the caffeinated disciple. No, well, wash my whole body then. And Jesus is like, no, you've already been baptized. Just let me wash your feet. Calm down. That's my translation, at least. So basically, we do the same thing that Peter did. We're like, no, you can't use that language that Jesus is a servant king to this day. Yeah, maybe when he was on earth, but not in Revelation. No, in Revelation, he's wearing a girdle of gold. Why? Because the Lord is saying, I am your king, but how can I serve you? That's what the Father looks like. If you've seen me, says the Son, you've seen the Father. So I want to encourage you on this Christmas season, during this Christmas season, the Lord wants to bless you. He wants to heal your broken heart. He's given me so much joy, so much hope. I've been through bad stuff. And there are times when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I just want to go back to bed. And I just want to stare at walls and be a robot with dead batteries and not think. I don't know if you're like me, but we have so many thoughts, 30,000 to 50,000 thoughts every day, 86 to 100 billion interconnected neurons. And what happens is my brain just gets caught in a vortex of thought and I get so trapped in my own skull and I can overthink everything. And sometimes it can get so stressful and seized by anxiety and I can lose hope. And then last night I just literally go on walks and I just talk to God and I'm not selfless, awesome, noble prayer like bless the missionaries in Zimbabwe. I'm like, Lord, this hurts right now. Please help. Here's my dream. Please make this happen. Here's some girl problems. Here's some financial stuff. Here's some dreams I have. Why did this person say this, Lord? And I just talked to him because he said, I don't call you servants. I call you friends. How can I serve you as I wear a girdle of gold? He wants to give you hope. He wants to heal you. He wants to answer prayers at your behest. He wants to fight battles on your behalf. He wants to take away your distress. And so when you know that this is who he is, he's a servant king, you're going to have a whole lot of hope this Christmas because he wears that gold in a girdle in Revelation 1. That's why I have hope. Okay, let's keep going. I won't keep you too long, but I mean, Zamora says, he's like, just, they want this stuff, so. Okay, can I just do a quick commercial break? Since you guys like going deep into the Bible, so can I just give you like a crazy, like some super sick, crazy stuff? Okay, I will anyway. Here we go. Jesus is such an amazing servant king that he's called the Son of David, right? David anointed 3 times with oil, the anointed one. Jesus, this is really cool. Remember when he's called the Son of David, it's interesting because in the Bible, when David tried to conquer Jerusalem, it was initially called Jebus. That's why Jerusalem was inhabited by Jebusites. And when he went to conquer Jerusalem, what did all the Jebusites say? They're like, even the lame and the blind could stop you. There's a lot of ancient trash talk in the Bible. Even the lame and the blind could stop you. And then this is one of my favorite verses in Chronicles. It says, nevertheless, he conquered it. It doesn't even tell us how. It's just like he heard, that's the way to approach life. People trash talk you. They're like, you'll never do it. It's impossible. And I'll say, impossible is not a dare. It's not a declaration. It's a dare. They're like, you're not going to do it, Ben. You're not going to change the world. I'm like, nevertheless, I will. What if you just talk that way to people? It's like, yeah, like you can't pray prayers that big. It's like, nevertheless, I will. You can't be healed of that disease. Nevertheless, I will. You can't accomplish that goal. Nevertheless, I will. It just literally says that. It's like, even the lame and the blind could stop you. You cannot conquer Jerusalem. And it says, nevertheless, David conquered it. That's a really cool thing. But watch. Jesus did 3 miracles in Jerusalem. One was for himself, in the story of raising himself from the dead in the narrative. But 2 times were for other people. Watch this. One was healing a blind person at the pool of Bethesda, and one was healing a lame person at the pool of Siloam. Some of you are catching this. And he's called the Son of David, so the Jews are like, whoa, did he just do that? The only 2 miracles he did for somebody else in Jerusalem was he healed a blind person and a lame person. Because when his ancestor, great-grandfather David, conquered Jerusalem, they said the lame and the blind could stop you. And so the Son of David comes in and he's like, the lame and the blind won't stop me from healing them. My ancestor took care of the physical needs of Jerusalem. I'm going to take care of the spiritual needs of Jerusalem. He conquered the city politically. I'm going to not do a White House makeover. I'm going to do a spiritual takeover, and I'm going to dominate this whole thing. So do you see why Herod's like, we got to kill this guy? Everyone's acknowledging he is the Son of David. He's the king. He's the rightful heir to the throne. I just thought that'd be a fun little quick thing. Okay, well, we got to go. I'm just trying to see. I think I have talked for an hour. I've talked for a full hour. Okay, can you guys hang with me for like 8 more minutes? Okay. We're going ham on this. Okay. Number 1 is gold. We'll just race through the last ones. Number 2 is shepherds. Shepherds. Remember the shepherds in your nativity scene? Because in Luke 2, what do the angels do? They come to shepherds and they start singing peace on earth, goodwill toward men, glory to God in the highest, exceeding great tidings of joy, of glad joy. Remember the shepherds getting the angel concert in the fields at night, silent night, holy night, peace on earth, goodwill toward men, joy to the world. The first Christmas carol. Now, what's interesting about that is shepherds, and a lot of people don't know this today because Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd, and we don't live in a nomadic tribe, so I doubt there's very many shepherds in here. I mean, I could be wrong. But I'm sure there's like some bankers here. I'm sure there's some firemen here. I'm not positive there's a lot of Middle Eastern, Mesopotamian, Mediterranean nomadic shepherds around in the room, but I could be wrong. Basically, we don't know much about shepherds, but back in that day, in the 1st century, shepherds were hated. Like, they were the outcasts. The religious people hated them because they didn't perform the ceremonial hand washings. And so they were considered unclean. In other words, like the untouchables, the lepers, the unrighteous. Like, they're from the wrong side of the tracks. Like, don't go to that side of town. They're from the other side of the river. Like, don't hang out with shepherds. If a shepherd had gone against a taboo in the village, he was then sequestered to hang out with sheep all day. And then when he'd come back into the village, he'd smell like sheep. In fact, the smell of lambs would be so strong that the smell would precede him. So everyone would just smell him from a mile away. They're like, that's a shepherd. And it worked as well as a bell around his neck. Like, the unclean guy's here. So they were outcasts. They were outlaws. They were oddballs and the odd man out. And I always like to say, if you want to be number one, you have to be odd. You'll get it on the way home. Okay, shepherds. Odd is one is an odd number. If you want to be number one, you have to be. Okay. Helping you out there. Okay, here we go. Some of you are like, it just wasn't funny. Okay. So the shepherds were the oddball outcasts. So when Jesus called himself a good shepherd, he was identifying with the outcast. There's this really funny dig that he made at the Pharisees. In Luke 15, they were judging him, and he told the story of a prodigal son, and he told the story of a woman who lost a coin and found it, and a story of a shepherd who went after one sheep, because he's the one who never leaves the one behind. He says to the Pharisees, I loved it. I just learned this the other day, like 2 weeks ago. Jesus said to the Pharisees, suppose one of you had 100 sheep. It would be kind of like, saying to a pastor, like, yes, suppose you owned a brothel with 100 prostitutes. I love Jesus so much. He's like, you got this whole thing wrong. Like, you think you're in, they're out, but I'm going to eat with tax collectors and sinners and identify myself as shepherds to stand in solidarity with them. Very powerful stuff. But the shepherds were outcasts. Isn't it interesting how they get the concert? How the first message of the birth of Jesus comes to them? That's my second way to open the nativity scene, the shepherds. Do you feel left out this Christmas season? You weren't invited to the party. Your kids didn't come when invited. You feel forgotten, alone. Civilization is happening there. You've been expelled, and you're out in the fields. Maybe you feel alone this Christmas season like an outcast. Can I tell you, you're the first person that our God targets. You will never be less lonely than when you get alone with God. I know the holidays can be lonely, and you can feel like an outcast. You are so close to the Lord's heart. He won't leave you. He won't forsake you. He really loves you. Oh no, Ben, I'm a shepherd. He loves you so much that he identifies with you by calling himself a good shepherd. You don't need to feel alone these holidays. He's with you. When you turn your cares into prayers, your stresses into supplications, your worries into worship, your fear into faith, your panic into praise, your fear into faith in your Father, you'll never be less lonely than when you get alone with God. He's with you. Good stuff. Maybe you feel like a shepherd, like a failure. They were failures. They'd gone against the taboo. Well, you're in very good company. Maybe you feel like a failure this Christmas. You're like, man, I feel like a failed parent or a failed spouse or a failed student, or I got cut from the basketball team, or I lost my temper when it should be a time of jolly joy. If you feel like a failure, Colonel Sanders, he of mustache fame, the creator of KFC, was turned down by over 1,000 restaurants when he tried to sell his chicken recipe. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor because he, and I quote, lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Walt Disney tried to get funding for Disneyland, and he was turned down by more than 100 banks. Disneyland's first opening, I'm speaking at California Adventure tomorrow, but Disneyland's first opening was actually an unmitigated disaster. Charlie Chaplin, the first movie star in America, was turned down by his first screen testers because they said his act is too obscure for people to understand. Winston Churchill failed 6th grade and lost every public office role he ran for, and he became prime minister in his 60s. And then he couldn't get elected after he won World War II. And he won a Nobel Prize for literature. And he was really clever. Like one time Nancy Astor said, Winston, if you were my husband, I'd poison your tea. And Churchill said, and madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink the tea you poisoned. He was a boss. As you know, Churchill tended to be kind of tipsy. And one time he was drinking, and Bessie Braddock said, Winston, you're drunk. And Churchill said, and madam, you're ugly. And tomorrow when I wake up, I'll be sober. And tomorrow when you wake up, I think you can get the rest. Thomas Edison was told by his school teachers he was too stupid to learn anything. Beethoven was told he was a hopeless composer. Dr. Seuss, his first book was rejected by 27 different publishers. Harrison Ford, after his first small movie role, was taken into an executive's office and told he would never make it in the movie business. Tell that to Chewbacca. Vincent van Gogh sold one painting in his entire life, The Red Vineyard, months before he died. One painting in his entire life. No wonder he cut off his ear. Abraham Lincoln lost an embarrassing 8 elections, couldn't get into law school, failed at business twice, had a nervous breakdown before he became our 16th president. Mark Ruffalo, the Oscar-nominated actor who plays the Hulk in one of the most successful box office movies of all time, the Avengers series. Mark Ruffalo went to almost 600 auditions before he got his first role. Could you imagine going to 600 auditions before you got your first role? Babe Ruth struck out 1,330 times. James Dyson, you know the Dyson vacuum? He created 5,127 prototypes. And you thought you had some failures on your way to your victory. Moses had temper problems. Elijah was moody. Paul killed Christians. Nathaniel was racist. John tried to call fire from heaven. David committed murder, and his son tried to rape his sister and succeeded. Gideon hid in a wine press. Rahab was a prostitute, and she made it into the Hall of Faith. And Peter denied Jesus 3 times when a little girl peer pressured him. I didn't say the Bible was rated G, did I? Here's what I'm saying. You may fail, but God's love never fails, and that's what counts. It ain't about how high you climb, it's about how high you bounce back when you hit the bottom. Like, Ben, his mercies are new every morning. Lamentations 3 says, but I've sinned already 16 times today. Well, here's the good news. If you go to the ISS, the International Space Station, like, where is this going? Watch. You go in the cupola model. In the cupola module, in the ISS, International Space Station, when you look out from the window, astronauts see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every day in a 24-hour period. So the Bible says you're seated in heavenly places. So his mercies are new every morning, but you might get 16 of those per day. That was sick. Really quick, thirdly, Christmas carols, and then we'll dance on the plane. David, am I fine for like 4 more minutes? Okay. You told me, dude. Okay. I love you. 3 hours. Here we go, like Paul. I'm going till midnight. You're going to fall asleep. This is going to be awesome. Then you're going to fall out windows, and I'm going to have to resurrect you from the dead. If you don't understand that reference, just read the book of Acts when you get home. I'm really going to go quick here. First Christmas carol, given to shepherds. So we have gold. He's the servant king. We have shepherds, outcasts, failures. They get the first message of grace. So too with you and me. Thirdly, I love this one, the Christmas carol. Who gets the Christmas carol? Shepherds. They're singing it in honor of baby Jesus. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, glory to God in the highest. They're singing in the heavens. Why is that interesting? Because in the first century, when a baby boy was born, this was the custom. The local musicians would come to the house, strike up a tune, and play music in honor of the baby boy that was just born. Yet Jesus had no musicians play for him when he was born. In fact, there was no room for him in the inn. He was born in a manger, which was actually a feeding trough because he was the bread of life. There was no musician that played for him when he was born. Why is this interesting? Because where the earthly musicians failed, they were supposed to come and play for Jesus' birth. That's what you did back then. Watch. Where the earthly musicians failed, the heavenly angels struck up a tune and played a concert that would put any Coldplay or Millennium show to shame. Jesus could have said, oh, I'm such an outcast. Nobody played for me. It's my birthday. I can cry if I want to. He could have said that. But whenever I'm glad I got a reference that like all generations understood. But when you go through that and you feel rejected, remember your rejection is God's protection. And people can put you down, they can't take you down. You may get the frown of men, but you will get the smile of heaven. The earthly musicians may fail, but the heavenly angels strike up a tune. That was fire. Can I get an amen? And the last one is the big finale. We'll close with this. What were Jesus' first words? So we get the gold, the hope that he serves us. We get the shepherds, he loves the outcasts. We get the Christmas carols, our rejection is God's protection. And number 4, and finally, and we'll really end with this. You guys are so cool. You guys are just fun to talk to. I'm sorry I went so long, but this is it. What were Jesus' first words? To know, you have to go back to the Jewish Old Testament religion. The Hebrews named God Yahweh. Would everyone say Yahweh? Yahweh. Now, the Hebrew language has no vowels. A-E-I-O-U. It only has consonants when it's written. And what you're expected to do is when you read the consonants in the Hebrew language, no vowels, you're expected to put the vowels in when you start talking. But in written language, the name Yahweh, does anyone know how to spell it? It's Y-H-W-H. Consonants, no vowels. Why? Because correctly pronouncing the name Yahweh, you cannot use your tongue, and you cannot do so with closed lips. To speak the name Yahweh was actually, I just learned this is really fire. To speak the name Yahweh was meant to imitate and replicate breath. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. That's what the Jews intended to do when they had this name Yahweh. It was meant to imitate and replicate breath. Yah, you would inhale. Way, you would exhale. It's crazy with the lips and the tongue and the way that you pronounce the consonants. Yahweh. It was meant to imitate and replicate breath. So the first words Jesus ever spoke out of his mother's womb, Yahweh. The last words that he ever spoke, Father, into your hands do I commend my spirit. As he gave up the ghost. A lot of people say, where is God? And I would say, what shape is yellow? It's a wrong categories. The question is not where is God, the question is where isn't God? He's as close as your very breath. That's why it's funny to me when atheists are like, there is no God. Like, no, I'm positive through a priori and a posteriori logic, there is no God. So he actually is as close as your very breath. Where can you flee from him? If God seems far away from you, he's as near as your very breath. In every language, in every primary language, did you know the word for spirit and breath is the same? Ruach in Hebrew, spirit, breath. Greek in pneuma, spirit, breath. Why did Jesus breathe on his disciples and then the Spirit came on him, on his disciples? Because spirit and breath are the same word. So you breathe the Spirit with groanings that cannot be uttered. Yahweh, come on, somebody. And I want to tell you, he is as close to you as your very breath. So we, my friends, have no reason to despair on these holidays. We are going to hope because hope is dope. We are the people who are going to say, we know that the story of Jesus, the nativity scene, gives us so much joy that we are going to spread the Christmas cheer 365 days a year. We are not going to look down and get distressed. We're not going to look around and get stressed. We're not going to look inside and get depressed. We're going to look up and get blessed because Jesus rose so we could rise. We know that wrong will be worsted and right will triumph. We are baffled to fight better. We sleep to wake. We fall to rise. We might have hell around us. We have the kingdom of heaven inside of us, and we are the people who've gone through hell carrying buckets of water for those still consumed by the flame, because we are not surprised by our fiery tribulation, because our fire does not burn us. It only forges us, because God is a consuming fire who never burns what we are. He only burns what we are not. So we are going to count it all joy and have hope during the holidays. No matter what happens around us, we have hope inside us. And Jesus said, I give you a joy that no man can take from you. Come on. We're going to change this generation. We're going to give it hope. Big stuff.